I'd like to call to order the Gig Harbor City Council meeting of Monday, May 10th, 2021. Time is 5:35. Due to public health concerns, this meeting will be accessible by phone by dialing the number that we've put on our website, also the meeting ID number for connecting with your computers is also available there. Comments are allowed. Public comments are only allowed during a designated portion of this meeting. So to speak during the meeting, you'll need to press the raise hand button near the bottom of your Zoom window or press *9 on your phone. Please refrain from raising your hand until the mayor has announced that he has opened the public comment portion of the meeting. Your name or your last 4 digits of your phone number will be called out when it's your turn to speak. When using your phone to call in, you may need to press *6 to unmute yourself. All speakers will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Now, instead of speaking, you may have wanted to submit public comments in writing before the meeting. And as we list on our website, that has to be done prior to 3 p.m. and provided to our city clerk. With that, I will do a roll call. Please say here or I after I call your name. Councilmember Abersol.
Here.
Councilmember Franich.
Here.
Councilmember Himes.
Here.
Councilmember Markley.
Here.
Councilmember Rodenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Wook.
Here.
Thank you. This is Mayor Kikune. Councilmember Denson has been excused. And from staff, we have City Administrator Bob Larson.
Here.
Community Development Director Katrina Knutson.
Here.
We've excused Kelly Busey, our chief. And we have Public Works Director Jeff Langhelm.
Here.
We have Finance Director Dave Rodenbach.
I'm here.
We have our Tourism Communication Director Laura Cadet.
Here.
We have our City Clerk Molly Townsend.
Here.
Our Assistant City Clerk Josh Stecker.
Here.
And our City Attorney Carrie Sands.
Here.
Is there anyone here? It doesn't look like it that I have not called. Okay. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's see. Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda by council? Okay, move to approve, move to go forward. Do I have a motion to pass our consent agenda?
Move to
Councilmember
approve.
Himes.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Consent agenda passes 7-0. Mayor's report as far as COVID-19. A week from tomorrow, we will be getting an update from our governor's office on where we stand with our phases. Right now, we're in a pause in phase 2. I do know that there's a lot of people that have sent letters to our legislators concerned that some of the numbers up in King County were higher and they were able to stay in phase 3, and that they would like to push the governor's office to let us proceed on. So we will see what happens, but we're just encouraging everyone to wear their masks, social distance, so we can move on to the next phase. Do I have a report from the city administrator?
No report tonight, Mayor.
Okay. All right, let me look at the Yes, Molly.
You were going to do a report on the donations, and Josh has got a PowerPoint showing the donations of the 2 benches and the water fountain in the letter to the Chapel Hill.
Yes, great. I'd like to say that we received a bench donation right here. This was, this bench is at our city park, and it's right next to the electrical box, is on the left side of this shot. And so I'd like to thank, I believe it's Gloria. I believe it's Gloria Riley donated this bench, and I met her down there, and she wanted to donate a bench. So thank you very much, Gloria, for donating this bench. We also have another bench that will, okay, we have a water dispenser. This is about a $5,000 water dispenser that's at Crescent Creek Park. So it's, we already had plumbing there, but it's really nice. And do we have the names, Jeff, of who donated this? I don't have it right in front of me.
No, I'm sorry, I don't have the names. I can look for that.
Okay. Let's see, but we don't have it turned on yet because of COVID. So we haven't had time to be able to, we have to wait until COVID is done to turn on our drinking fountains. So just 1 second, let's see. Okay, we will get that at the next meeting. So thank you for the citizen that donated this. We also have a bench at Wilkinson Park from Miss Bartolino. This is the family generously donated the memorial bench that's at Wilkinson Farm Park near the pond. So this will provide a wonderful opportunity for our visitors to go to the area, rest, and enjoy the park and Gig Harbor's beauty. I also sent a letter to Pastor Martoon and the leadership team at Chapel Hill Presbyterian Church. The city of Gig Harbor would like to thank you and all the volunteers for the use of the Chapel Hill campus for multiple vaccination events. The events have been well coordinated, and the site provides the perfect venue. Your generosity has provided the opportunity for many in our community to become vaccinated and to allow us to move towards a more normal existence during this pandemic. Please share a sincere appreciation for the use of the Chapel Hill campus with your church. And then just one more moment. Let's see. Okay, I can't find the other name of the person that did yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, Mayor, I found the name of the family that donated for the fountain. It is by the Shields family. It is dedicated to Douglas Canoe, and it states on the plaque, just imagine some of the things we can do.
Great, thank you very much. So we've got some great donations from citizens in our community. And again, thank you, Chapel Hill. We will open up the public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Again, this is for something that's not on the agenda right now. But sorry, Councilmember Franich, we will bring that right back after the public comment. Were there any public comments that were written, turned in, Bob?
No, I checked with City Clerk Molly Towsley, and we do not have anything else turned in.
Okay.
Or anything that's on the agenda.
All right. Now I will direct my attention to callers. And Tomlinson, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, and go ahead.
Hello, my name is Tom Tomlinson. I live at 7019 Stanage. My concerns are about a new home built on 7013 Stanage that, as far as I'm concerned, is a triplex. And I've sent in 2 code enforcement requests on it, asking for something to happen on it, because this area is zoned R1 very clearly. There are three residents in this place now. There are 3 separate entrances. There are 3 separate refrigerators, 3 separate kitchens. I mean, it's just basically a triplex in reality. And it's frustrating that my 2 code requests, enforcements have been ignored. Not ignored, that's the wrong choice, is they have not been acted on in my mind. So I've sent in the 2. One was January 1. This place was zoned, or I think permitted January 1, or about then. Sent in a second one mid-March. I've received back 2 emails from the city on it, but there doesn't appear to be a resolution on it yet. I'm hearing back that they're still looking into the legality of it. Seems this is very clear. Seems you should be able to get, if you haven't done this in your city, you should be able to contact another city that has codes and enforces it. Just a frustration on my part. So that said, there we go.
Thank you, Tom. And the next person, the caller 874 or 1253. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Kuhn, members of the City Council. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, they can.
Okay. Hey, this is Tom Wick. I'm over here on Hunt Street Northwest. Not a new name. I'm going to kind of echo the previous gentleman's frustration. He reached out, and it seems like there's some departures from standard policies and procedures, and outreaches to the city seem to prove fruitless, at least for that gentleman anyway so far. So I know I sound like an echo chamber because I've been consistently, harping on the same issue, but Mayor Kuhn, I just don't understand why you don't direct your staff to let us pay for a drainage evaluation so it can guide the city of Gig Harbor's decisions. It leaves me perplexed beyond belief. I'm trying to guess what your defense is, and I can't come up with one. You're the mayor, you're the strong mayor, and you have the authority. And of course, Mr. Larson is your administrator, and he works at your pleasure. And I mean, the 2 of you could just get in your car and spend 5 minutes, drive down to the intersection of Hunt and Scansey and say, is there a ditch at the outfall? Yes or no? And if there isn't, then we slam the brakes on uphill development until we figure out a drainage. And I have been frustrated and deeply concerned about the city's lack of regard for others outside city's limits. So I would ask that you do that again, Mayor Kuhn, and I would ask that the council urge you to do the right thing. And I think failing to do so is, well, I'm not going to comment on that. I'll refrain. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other callers that wish to speak? Okay, I will close the public comment on non-agenda items. Councilmember Franich, I did not see your hand up early enough before I opened up the public comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, where would I find the criteria for donations?
A couple years ago, we developed new rules to where you can go to our municipal code, but I believe it's If a donation is under $2,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, that the mayor may accept the donation on behalf of the city as long as he or she informs council within 60 days. And that it's the same time when we did the nativity scene, that's when we changed it.
Thank you.
Sure. Staff report, we have our conservation futures property report from our Public Works Director, Jeff Langhill.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Just wanted to quickly follow up from our special council meeting on May 6th, where we were discussing conservation futures property. And there was, as we know, authorization to move forward with the purchase and sale agreement. After, I just want to let you know that the purchase and sale agreement is proceeding. As soon as we get through the purchase and sale agreement signature steps, we are going to then issue the notice to proceed for the appraisal on the property. Then, depending on the outcome of the appraisal, we'll return back to council and review that. And if we continue to proceed with this property, then we will then issue notice to proceed for the environmental assessment, phase 1, environmental site assessment. And then lastly, if everything up to that point is looking appropriate and we continue to get the direction from council to proceed, we will then issue a notice to proceed for the survey. Now, all of these 3 contracts, we already have consultants contracts awarded, and so they're just waiting for the city to issue notice to proceed. And once we've completed all 3 of these processes, assuming we still want to continue, we will then take the last steps that are on the city's policy for property purchase. We have a checklist, as you probably know, that outlines the steps that we need to take. Most of those steps in that process are already complete or underway, and we will return once we get through all of those processes and let you know that we have hopefully finished all of those and are ready to proceed to the remaining steps. So I just wanted to give a quick overview. There are some questions and I wanted to clarify the next steps in the process. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Okay.
Great, thank you. And then Stinson Rosedale Roundabout Project. Again, Public Works Director, Jeff Langhill.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm sure most of you or all of you have probably driven through that intersection. You can see that the majority of the work is complete. There are some next steps that we need to have the contractor complete to finish out the contract work. Those include finishing concrete curb and gutter and sidewalk in some sections, though most of it has been placed. Also installing the flashing beacons that will be at the crosswalks at each or 3 of the 4 legs of the roundabout. And then street lighting, there has been some additional street lighting foundations placed and conduit run. We just are waiting for the actual street lights. They're on order. I think I heard today they're about 12 weeks out. So they're a ways out. And then lastly, we also need to do roadway striping. There is a requirement in our specifications that the roadway striping not occur sooner than 21 days after the final lift of paving. That's so that the asphalt can gas off the gases from the hot mix asphalt tar, and then it'll be ready after 21 days for striping. So we'll take the next weather opportunity to get the striping done. What you'll see in the near future is the contractor this month will be working on the concrete curbing and sidewalk. There's some gaps that the contractor had to make previously, and so they'll finish with those gaps in May. And then we think all the rest of that work will be completed in June. You also may notice that one of the subcontractors is going to likely have to remove the crosswalk ramps that are located at the intersection of Stinson and Grandview. So according to our inspectors, construction supervisors, they did not pour some of those correctly. So they're going to have to remove 1 or maybe 3 that if you'll drive by there, you'll notice not all of them are installed yet, but they may have to remove up to all of them that have been installed because they did not install them correctly. So, but our construction supervisors are working with them on that. But if you see somebody ripping out the ramp and replacing it, that's why. So, but we're on track for getting the project done on time and within budget. So that's a good thing. Any questions, Councilmember Franich?
Yeah, what were the problems with the crosswalks?
It has to do with the detectable warning ramps. Those are the cast iron ramps with the domes on them, truncated domes. There is a federal specification that has spacing on those, and the contractor installed them in a way that didn't meet that spacing. So their supervision or construction supervisors are checking all of them. They know that at least one of them has to be replaced, and they may have to replace all of them.
Okay. Also, I was noticing that the transition going west after you're through the intersection of Grandview, right before the chevron where that transition is from the old pavement to the new pavement. You know, I know that there's certain standards that, you know, there's some leeway in there, but that seems like it could have been a little smoother transition.
Seems abrupt, in your opinion?
Yeah, I just don't want to get into the same thing that we got into down here on Harborview by Ancich with, you know, well, it wasn't the scope of the project, so now we're going to be going back. Well, we may not be doing it this year. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, let me talk with our construction supervisors. I haven't driven that section of road. I've driven Stinson only between Grandview and, well, I guess Harborview, but so I haven't driven that section. But let me talk to the construction supervisors about that and see if that's something that's on their punch list, because we have some punch list items to deal with.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Rodenberg.
Yes, Director Langhelm, on other projects in the city where we've installed streetlights, when the wiring was put in through the conduit, it was quickly stolen. So I'm wondering if that conduit has wiring in it, and does it? Fortunately, on Harbor Hill, the wiring still belonged to the contract, and the city didn't suffer a loss. So when that wiring goes in, is it going to be ours until they turn on the lights? Theirs until they turn on the lights? Or is there not any wiring in there at all? Just curious about that.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know if there's wiring in the conduits right now. I doubt there is, but if there is conduit or wiring in the conduits, we do have some anti-theft methods that I won't go into that try and deter thefts from pulling those. I can't imagine why the contractor would put the wiring in there. It is their project site right now. The only thing we accepted at this point was the roadway itself, so that we could take responsibility for that in case there was an issue or accidents or what have you. And so since the contractor has to open it to the public per our requirements, then we can take responsibility for that. But things like the street lights, since they're not turned on and operational, they're not the city's under the city's technically ownership yet. That they still are under the responsibility of the contractor.
Thank you.
Yep. Councilmember Wook.
Yes, thank you. This is a great project, and it's when you drive around the roundabout, the more you drive it, the easier it becomes, and the more you understand that you need to watch lots of places and 15 miles an hour. So, you know, I think our community is really appreciative from what I hear so far. And the ones that are concerned, I just tell them to keep driving it and they'll get used to it. So thank you for the hard work, and thank you for the quick work, and thanks for your whole team. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. I think this is a great example of how to work with the contractor to minimize impacts to the residents. I know it was painful for a short amount of time, but to have it over and done with, hopefully will show everybody that it was worth the wait.
Totally.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we have Councilmember Denson that has joined us a few minutes ago. Is that correct, Councilmember?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Great. There's no old business, so we will go on to our first item of new business is first reading and adoption of Ordinance 1461, amending GHMC 5.28 special events. Here tonight to give the report is our Assistant City Clerk, Josh Stecker.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. This is an ordinance that staff has put together to help address some issues with special event permitting that we've been running into recently. We're getting close to summer, so we're starting to get a number of inquiries from people in the community about when and how they can run special events and how the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions are going to play into that. I'm sure you're all aware that we talk about it constantly, how the restrictions from the pandemic are constantly changing. So it's hard for these people to plan their events with any certainty, knowing that they could be canceled at the last moment. Our current municipal code has the provision for special event permits, and they all require fees, and those fees by the code are completely non-refundable. So the first intent of this ordinance is to make it so that if a special event has to be canceled because of public health restrictions, we have the option to refund the fees to those groups. We're seeing where that would come into play with requests we've had from schools that want to have graduation events in the park, Boy Scout troops, other family or children activities where they're trying to plan ahead without knowing for sure whether they can or not. So this ordinance would give them the confidence that they can plan their event but not lose any money if they're not able to hold it. The second thing that this ordinance tries to do is works with the special expressive events that we added to the municipal code back in 2018. I think at the time when we had adopted the passage that allowed for special expressive events, our intent was that most of the special event chapter would not apply to that. There were a few things that didn't quite get caught in that. Special expressive events were not exempted from the 60-day requirement, which means that if someone wanted to hold a demonstration or a rally on short notice, we wouldn't be able to permit that. This ordinance will change that. It will also change the timeline required for special expressive events that would require a street closure like we had last summer. So we would be able to waive the 60-day requirement for that as well. Because we are getting really close to summer now and we have events scheduled that are coming up now while we're still in phase 2, staff is recommending that council adopt this ordinance on first reading so that we can start making administrative changes if we need to right away. We've had already some requests for special expressive events that we would not be able to approve until we do this. We've had one group that's requested the use of Scansey Park for a Juneteenth event that we've already had to say in our current code we wouldn't be able to approve. This ordinance is just designed so that we can be more flexible with requests like that from the community. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Councilmember Himes. Oh, you're on mute.
Is there a sunset clause on this post COVID-19?
There is not a sunset clause on this. The way the ordinance is written, it's just simply says if anytime that there's a public health emergency, that we would be able to cancel and refund an event. So it would apply during COVID, and if we ever run into another situation like COVID, you know, God forbid, this ordinance would be able to be applied at that time too.
So when the immediate health emergency is behind us, then we go back to the original legislation?
Yeah, the events would only be canceled if there is something, some kind of active public health measure that would prevent the event from occurring. So there would have to be some kind of governor's order or city order that says you can't use the park.
Okay.
Councilmember Franich.
Yeah, I've had several questions. My first question is on page 2 of 3. Is it numbered on the bottom of the packet? Under 5.28.100 B, the new part that's underlined, the last part of it is notice shall be reviewed in accordance with other provisions of this chapter. Is that refer back to 5.28060 where the city administrator notifies the applicant in writing of approval or disapproval, or is there some other provision.
There are other, yeah, the traffic control section kind of gives some general outlines on as to when the city administrator and chief of police would allow a road closure. This is just saying that it's only waiving the 90-day period. So the request for a road closure of, say, like Olympic Drive, which is never permitted, would still be in effect for a special expressive event. So you wouldn't be able to close Olympic Drive or Point Fosdick Drive for a special expressive event.
Well, I see that under E, there's it's listed the roads that cannot be closed. I'm just wondering about what criteria this will be reviewed under as it's stated.
Yeah, that criteria is not specifically spelled out in this chapter. It is left to the discretion of the city administrator and the chief of police, largely as to whether a traffic closure would be impactful or not.
Okay, well, I'd like to see that tightened up a little bit, but my other question is on page 3 of 3, 5.28.10150, under C, where we have the 2-hour maximum for all other events. I mean, is there a reason that we're carving out an expressive event for some special dispensation of that time limit?
The only reason to include that there is that special expressive events are called out in the code because the intent of council at the time of adopting it was not to infringe on free speech. And I believe the intent was not to limit free speech to a certain amount of time. That's up to council's discretion whether or not that should be in there or not.
Well, you know, and I didn't get a chance. I needed to go back because you know, I was talking to the mayor, and at the time when we were talking about special event permits in 2018, it was more in line with people using the park without permits. And can somebody remind me why we added this special expressive event language back in 2018?
Councilmember Frenich, this is Katrina Knudsen. I can attempt to illuminate this here. Special expressive events were brought up to us by our city attorney, Daniel Kenny, who at the time dealing with other jurisdictions regarding special event and application requirements, infringing upon constitutional rights to free speech. Therefore, we updated the special use code or special event code in order to more quickly allow for approvals of events pertaining to the First Amendment.
But
maybe Carrie, do you want me to address you as Mrs. Say? How would you like me to address you?
Carrie or Miss Sand is fine, either way. I was just going to follow up on Councilmember Franich's earlier question about what is referred to when it this ordinance refers to other provisions of this chapter. And in 5.28.100 under C, it does also talk about how road closure requests not associated with a city or city-sponsored event must receive approval from the city's Finance and Safety Committee. That doesn't apply to special expressive events, but I just wanted to point out that there is typically a some type of review by the city's Finance and Safety Committee.
Thank you.
Right, I'm aware. Yeah, thank you for that. You know, that's why I thank you for that, Ms. Knudsen. I don't know if that's a complete answer that I was hoping for, but you know, picketing, protesting, that is allowed under the Constitution. So, you know, we have no way, and I don't believe that we should limit that as a city. But I'm just wondering, that's why I was trying to get a little bit more clarification on why we were adding this when it was already allowed under the Constitution. But it is what it is. I'm having a problem with giving this type of special expressive event extra time than any other special event.
Councilmember Frenich, if I may provide some additional information, because we know that marches and protests, et cetera, do not need to seek approval, the intent was if we allowed for a permit process that would be much simpler to go through for these types of events, that at least the city would have some knowledge that it would occur and we could notify the police chief to have adequate provisions, and that it wouldn't be a complete surprise or a complete shutdown, for instance, of Harborview Drive if Scansey Park were to be taken over by that. So this was a way for the city to be notified to ensure that those events can go on in somewhat of a coordinated manner. They would be, again, not subject to the insurance requirement that other special event permits are. So I hope that helps to answer your question, but it was a way for us to be kind of notified, but not subject necessarily to the other strict requirements of the special event code.
Councilmember Abersold.
I would just like to highlight that I believe it was last summer that we had maybe 7 or 8, I think, kind of semi-spontaneous events. And I don't believe any of them took place in any of the parks. I think they were all conducted on the street, sidewalks. Maybe there was one event that took place at the lawn in front of City Hall, but I don't recall anything happening in any of our parks.
There have been, I believe, 2 special expressive events that have gone through the process. One of them was at Scansey and one of them was at Donkey Creek. I can't recall what they were for at this point, but there were 2 that have gone through that.
You should probably note too that special event permits don't apply just to parks. They apply to road closures, any kind of public gathering in a public space, city right of way. So this is not just a parks related process.
Okay, thank you. We got clarifying questions from council. With that, I will open up the public comment. Bob Larson, were there any written public comments turned in?
Mayor, we did not receive any this evening on this matter.
Okay, I will look at our callers and see if there's any callers wish to comment on new business item 1. Please raise your hand. Okay, I will close the public comment. Now there'll be council deliberation and action. Any other comments by council before we vote on this? Councilmember Frenich.
Yes, I would just like to say I will be sticking by my normal thought process that I'm not in favor of passing anything unless it's an absolute emergency on first reading. So I will be abiding by that feeling tonight.
Okay. Okay. Can I have a council member put a motion out there? Councilmember Wook.
Thank you. I move to approve ordinance number 1461.
Is there a second? Councilmember Abersold, second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed?
No.
Abstain? Okay, motion passes 6-1. We will go on to our second item tonight of new business. Is Gig Harbor Canoe and Kayak Race Team Lease at Ancich Park. Second amendment to that. And the report is our Public Works Director, Jeff Langholm.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow a timeline for the development of the city's community paddlers dock to start this discussion. And because that will help us follow the lease that is currently in place between the Gig Harbor Canoe and Kayak race team and the city of Gig Harbor. We also have a first amendment that was adopted by City Council in, I think it was March or April of 2020. In the original lease, there was a goal for the team to raise $500,000 towards the development of the dock, both design and construction, permitting also. Then as part of amendment number 1 to the lease, the city and the team established some milestones for the team to meet the $500,000 goal. But as we all know, the project design has changed and the layout has changed based on an agreement that the city adopted in August of 2020 with the Jerkovich LLC group. That changed how and the dock layout would look, and also changed the cost of the project by significantly reducing it. The new layout for the dock was then identified in the city's 2021 budget. And due to the construction cost estimate at that time, it was going to be fully funded by the city as part of the 2021 budget. However, as we got through the design and we're approaching final design for the dock, the cost estimate that was submitted to the city by the consultant was increased to $730,000. And so at that point, City Council wanted to look at other ways to support find additional funding for the project. So the proposed second amendment that you have before you tonight would amend the Ancich Park lease and agreement for services between the city and the Gig Harbor Canoe and Kayak race team. It would continue to have the two groups work together to fund the dock. It would specifically adjust the terms of the existing lease and establish a new donation amount to be not less than $100,000. And that $100,000 amount does not include the previous donations that have been provided to the city by the team. So that's the summary of the second amendment that you have before you tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, don't see any clarifying questions from council. With that, we will go to public comment. We will open up the public comment period. Bob, were there any written public comments?
Mayor, we did not receive any written comments on this item tonight.
Thank you. Now we'll open up the public comment for callers. If there's anyone from the public that wishes to comment, please raise your hand, *9 or *6. I will close the public comment. Clarifying questions from council. I'm sorry, any deliberation from council? Councilmember Franich.
Well, you know, I'm really having some troubles with these extensions. When it was going to be a $1.2 or $1.4 million project, and they were going to come up with a minimum of 500,000. Then they were going to come up with the whole thing, and then it was back to 500,000. I could see maybe having them have this sort of leverage over a publicly owned building. But now that we're down to talking about $160,000, apparently 100,000 to raise, and they've got 60,000 already put out in designs. I just don't think it's appropriate or fair to the greater community that we are tying up a publicly owned building for this amount of time for a privately owned organization that you have to pay to be a member of. And I have some real problems with that. So I do not see, all along I've had the same one of the main problems I've had, other than the impact of the neighborhood of this whole facility, is the inequity to the general public.
Okay, I don't see any other council comments. Do I have a motion? Let's see. Do I have a motion to approve and authorize the mayor? Okay. So there is no motion.
Isn't this first reading?
No. This is just a second amendment.
Yeah, this is a contract authorization, a contract amendment authorization, not an ordinance.
Right. So if someone doesn't make a motion, then this dies. Okay, now also someone could do amendment since if they wanted to too. Councilmember Markley, or go ahead, just one moment, Councilmember Markley, if we can hear from our city administrator first.
Just a point of clarification, I think in order to get the discussion started or to even consider any amendments, you need to put the motion on the floor. I'll ask for Attorney Sand to confirm that.
Yeah,
That's correct, Administrator Larson. And the motion is at the bottom of page 2 of 5 of this item in your packet. So a motion and second is needed to launch the discussion.
okay, and 2 of 5 is in the top page of as far as the number goes, 2 of 5.
It's the staff
Recommendation.
agenda.
Right.
And
Councilmember
by the way, also, if I could clarify, Mayor, this is City Administrator Larson. When you go through the agenda, I just want to remind folks, excuse me for a minute. So you had the report from the director, then you had clarifying questions from council, then you had any public comment. And then once the council deliberation starts, before there's any statements made, it would be appropriate for someone to get the motion on the table in order to start the discussion.
Correct. Thank you, Bob. Council member, so yes, so if there's going to be any if there's going to be any comments by council as far as deliberation, let's start with a motion. And if you want to amend it, we still need to start with a motion. Councilmember Markley. You're on mute, council member.
Sorry. I wasn't going to make a motion. I just was going to ask a question. If this dies and there is no motion, what alternatives are there left with? So if that can't be answered without a motion being made, I just wonder where this goes. If this isn't approved tonight, then where does that leave us with this contract?
At this point, the First Amendment is still in place and the terms of the First Amendment are still in place. So the Canoe and Kayak race team would be required to provide us the schedule of payments or donations outlined in Amendment 1, which I believe is, and they didn't, his first installment was, I think, April 8th of this year, and it was an amount of $167,000 or so. I can look that up and make it exact, but they had an amount that they owed us and they didn't provide that donation. So without that, then they're in default of the contract, and it says what to do if they didn't do that. So they lose some time on their lease, I believe is what it was. I can bring that up on the screen if you want to see what the outline looks like.
It would help to clarify this decision. Thank you.
Okay.
One thing Councilmember Franich had mentioned was that the amount that they have to pay now versus what it was before, 100,000 instead of 400 or 500, and yet they get the same amount of terms on their lease that they had with the 500. And that was one thing that Daniel had even mentioned. If you're going to give up a big chunk of the money, but you're going to keep the same amount of years on the lease, maybe it's fitting to give less years on the lease since you're giving less years on the money. And I think that is one of the points that Councilmember Franich was trying to put out there.
Okay, hopefully you can see this. I can make it larger if you'd like, but this is the First Amendment to the lease here. Let me do that. Let me make it larger. There's the First Amendment to the lease. The term that I'm referring to is down here, right here. This amends, I believe it's section 4.2 of the existing lease.
So and following with what city administrator mentioned, let's have our questions first, clarifying questions, since we don't have a motion out there yet, unless someone wants to make a motion. Councilmember Abersold,
I'll make the motion.
go ahead.
Okay, approve and authorize the mayor to execute the second amendment to the Ancich Park lease, an agreement for services with the Gig Harbor Canoe and Kayak race team.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay. Councilmember Franich.
So they had a payment due April 8th and they did not make it.
I believe, let me scroll down. Sorry, I think that was yeah. So it says it's within 12 months of the date of this agreement. So this was dated April 8th of 2020. And we were already in negotiations with them before April 8th of 2021 for the Second Amendment. And in conversations with the city attorney, we agreed that if this Second Amendment was approved by council, then it negated this portion of the First Amendment term. So because it overrides it. This, if you look in the language of the Second Amendment, it deletes this section of the lease and provides new language. So it's as if this language never existed if the Second Amendment is authorized. Second Amendment is not authorized, then yes, they're in default.
So right now, they are only entitled to the original 5-year term.
Correct, and they're
Legally.
obligated to $500,000. And the 5-year term will end in, I think, 2 more years, because the 5-year term began June 28th of 2018, I believe.
Well,
I might add that we did go to them and say, let's have 5 years less, being that you're paying less money, and they didn't like that. So they came back and said, no, we don't like that. So we want both. So I'm sorry, Bob.
Mayor, just a point of clarification again. There was a motion on the table. It was not seconded, and I'm not clear of if any discussion could even continue on this subject matter. And I would ask for the city attorney to please clarify that. I think you can get back. Go ahead.
That's correct. I did not hear a second. I did hear the motion from Councilmember Rodenberg, but I did not hear a second.
The actual motion was made by Councilor Abersold,
not Rodenberg.
Sorry, my apologies. It was Councilmember Abersold.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear a second either.
So without that second, I think the discussion and all debate would have to cease unless and until there would be a second.
Okay, I will second it just so we can keep talking about this because I want to ask a couple more questions.
Okay, there's a second. Go ahead, Councilmember Markley.
So my main question is any of this due to COVID and the fact that they weren't able to fundraise because of COVID, or is this simply because they didn't like whatever the terms were and so they're trying to just get something different out of it? Because we've been giving a lot of grace to people that haven't been able to meet things or be able to do things because of COVID. And so if that's the reason, why would we not extend the same grace to them and at least extend the fundraising deadline? But if that's not any part of this, then I guess that would change that.
Well, let me say that when amendment number 1 was approved by council, that was April of 2020. And then by May and June of 2020, we started to talk with the Djokovic Pier LLC folks about another alternative and a much lower cost alternative. And so essentially my understanding, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the canoe and kayak race team, but my understanding is they heard the council, they have this discussion with Djokovic Pier LLC. They heard the construction cost estimates that came forth at the time, middle of last year, of $400,000. They also heard the discussion of council and the proposal in the draft budget and the final adopted budget for 2021 of $400,000. And in that budget, it says that there was no money going to be provided from the canoe and kayak race team. And so essentially, the city council's budget was overriding this agreement that was previously provided. Now, there still was the agreement was still in place, but the city wasn't going to be asking them for that money. So it was in conflict. I'm not a lawyer, but there was a definite conflict there. And so it wasn't until January, February of 2021, when we received the cost estimates from the consultant, that we found that the actual construction cost for the project was $730,000. So it's my understanding that they just didn't, between COVID and having a very late understanding that, oh, they needed a $166,000, $167,000 amount to be provided in a couple months was probably a big ask for them. But again, I don't want to speak on their behalf.
I might add, originally they were going to pay 500 because it was 1.2 million. And then because we we're going to build a new dock and it was 1.2 and they were going to put in 5. And then when we found out we were going to be able to work with the Jerkovich dock, it wasn't going to cost as much. We thought it was going to cost about 4 to 5. And now aren't we thinking it's going to cost around $700,000 for the dock?
Yeah, and following up from the mayor, what the mayor was saying was that if it was 1.2 or $1.4 million, the canoe and kayak race team was going to be providing 500,000. The city was going to be providing the rest. So we were going to provide at least 700,000, if not more. And so the intent was, well, then the city's at a amount of $400,000, then the city was already willing to pay that amount for this dock.
Right. And even when we thought we were going to ask them for 100,000, we thought it was going to cost us 4 or 5, but it's up to 7 now, just so people know, in the same amount of years. Councilmember Abersold.
Yeah, has anyone from the kayak club reached out to us about not making the payment, or why?
Well, I do have to say, we told them that we were working on what they heard from council. We told them we were working on an amended lease. And so they knew that this was coming. And that's when we asked them to, if they're going to only pay 100, how about giving a little bit less years on the lease? And so they knew this was coming.
And they heard clearly from council that the council was only expecting the canoe and kayak race team to donate $100,000 total during I forget the date of the meeting, but it was sometime in February. And so they heard that loud and clear from the council that there was only intent to have the canoe and kayak race team donate 100,000 and not the 167. And so there was clear intent to have an amendment to the lease. And so I think, as the mayor was saying, they're waiting to hear from the city and what that would look like. And so in March, this is when we started that discussion with them before the payment was due.
Right. And council did hear, or they did hear from council, not necessarily about the years of the lease, but they did hear the council supportive of the 100, from my understanding. We talked about that. We council threw out different figures there. And so that's where that is. Councilmember Franich.
Well, don't you think that maybe somebody should have followed up prior to April 8th and had that discussion?
About what?
That the money was due.
Well, again, they heard council pretty much before April. They heard council, or about that time, kind of agree with the amount. And so there was no reason to ask them for a different amount than what we were bringing with a new amended lease.
Well, I don't agree with that.
Well, we're just going off what we heard from council, just if you go back to the recordings. So, Councilmember Himes.
Yeah, the 100,000. Have we looked at the break-even point were their rental fees, which are applicable to offsetting the 100,000, okay, still, as I understand it, reading the lease. How long does it take them to get there? Have we done that analysis? My quick math says it goes beyond 5 years.
Let me say, right now their payment is right around, well, the reduction from their rent credit, I should say,
Yeah,
is $1,600 a month,
okay,
less leasehold excise, and then also leasehold excise tax. So I think that that $100,000 will be reduced before you get to the end of that 5 years, because that cost of the rent continues to go up every year, and so does the leasehold excise tax.
okay. Then the second question is there, and maybe this is a question to the whole council, what would be a fair proposal to come back with, okay, if we don't like this, where would we go with this versus let's start all over again, which we've been doing for years now on this project?
So that's a good question. I have some thoughts, but go ahead, Councilmember Rodenberg.
Yeah, I think every possible variable that could have happened has happened. COVID kind of restricted their fundraising. They also heard from council that we only wanted $100,000. They heard that this amendment was coming. Can't hardly blame them for not coming up with $166,000 if they thought they were only going to have to pay 100. I think there should be, and I'm not sure we even reached out to them and told them this is what we're thinking about. I don't think there's been enough communication with them. I suggest that I won't be supporting this amendment, and I suggest that we go back to them and come up with an agreement that works for everybody. They've always been fair in the past. They've always wanted to pay their share. So I think coming up with this amendment without speaking to them is premature. That's my feeling.
Just to be clear, they signed this amendment. I mean, this is the signed version, so they're accepting of these terms.
Yeah, just so you know, I mean, this gives them 60% of the building, 2 5-year terms after the existing term they're in right now, and $100,000 amount. We're coming, they've signed this. We're coming to you because this is what they heard from council. So really, we need direction from council if you want something else, because Councilmember Franich.
On page 2 of 3, under rent adjustments, says beginning January 1st, 2019, the base rent under this agreement shall increase or decrease annually in an amount equal to the increase or decrease of the CPI. Have you done that analysis for 2019 and 2020?
Yes, because that term was in the previous agreement. And so our finance department does that every year.
Okay, so what, it was 1,500 in the original lease. What is today's rate?
Not counting the leasehold excise tax, $1,599.41.
So it's only gone up $99 in 2.5 years.
Correct.
Or 2 years.
2 years.
Boy, I don't know who was doing that math, but seems like rent has gone up a whole lot more than that.
It's based off of the federal government's numbers on in our cost index.
Well, I think that whole idea needs to be looked at, because we need to be using something a lot more fair for our citizens than that small amount of an increase. My other question is, have we decided, or has there been any discussions about what we plan on charging the public for storage?
There has been discussions that will be discussed as part of the Public Works Committee tomorrow, but it ranges anywhere from, I think, $20 a month to $50 a month for one human powered craft.
And how many in the remaining 40% of the building, do you have any idea how many kayaks or stand-up paddleboards?
We don't yet. That's again one of the things we're talking about at Public Works Committee tomorrow. Is we're trying to get some understanding of what the ratio of canoes versus kayaks versus paddleboards will be, because of course each one of those human powered craft take a different amount of storage space. But we're estimating right now roughly about 30.
Okay, well, that only 30.
Yes, only 30. So if you take $40 a month times 30 boards, that's $1,200 a month.
Wow. I thought that the kayak club had about 120 boards or kayaks.
No, I think they have about less than half of that. I thought it was about 50 or 60.
Okay, well, I think, thank you for the answer to that. I think that the only fair thing to do is maybe bring this back with a little bit better calculation. In my head, at $1.2 million, 500,000, that's about 40%. If we're at 700,000 now, 40% of that's 280,000. So I all along, I think the city should pay all of the amount to put in the floats. The kayak club's got however long they have on their lease, and a future city council can either choose to renew that lease or not renew that lease and give that storage building back to the general public where it should have been in the first place, so all residents can benefit from it.
Councilmember Markley.
Oh, thank you. So I would agree with bringing this back, maybe having another discussion with the canoe and kayak team. I'm trying to rack my brain about when council talked about $100,000. I'm trying to remember what meeting that was and when we said that. I just don't remember off the top of my head. So how much would this delay construction, or any kind of delay? Would this cause any kind of delay if we brought it back in a couple weeks to the next meeting? Would it make or break this whole thing? I mean, what is it that big of a deal, or can we take some more time on this?
It's in my opinion, it's not going to delay construction because we have a hearing examiner meeting May 20th on the project. We're going to be going out to bid right after that. I think this second amendment would need to be in place, in my opinion, for the city's best interest in time to award the contract. So we're anticipating awarding the contract at the July 12th city council meeting. So
Okay.
As long as it's in place by then, I think that you're safe to continue these negotiations. But remember, it's not just the city council making a decision on what the terms need to be. It's a negotiation, so we have to go back and forth. So my estimate, if there's some negotiations that are going to be restarted on the second amendment, is that we're not going to be back to council until the first or maybe even the second meeting in June. And I would like to make sure that I have very clear direction of, not of course the unanimous decision is, but a general consensus of what the council wants some of these terms to be. I've heard from Councilmember Franch, who's pretty clear based on the percentage of the previous time. And so I can do that math real quick, but if we're talking $200,000, $250,000, that's much different than the $100,000 that we talked about end of January, first part of February. And I can go back and find that information, but it was in January or February that we had that discussion.
Right. It was a work study session, if I remember, and we talked about it, and then council wasn't quite sure what to do, and someone threw out a figure of like 200,000 or 250. Someone threw out a figure of 50,000, and I said, why don't we just charge them 100,000? And then council basically gave us direction with that to go forward, and that's why we're here today. So I would, and again, they're gonna, they've signed this, so we need direction from you, meaning I'd rather have you amend this, because I'm not really gonna I'm not gonna direct staff to go to them when I don't know what to go with them with. They obviously want what they can get, as everyone does. So I don't know what to go to ask them. I'd rather have you, the other thing is, I'd rather have you amend it and then see if they, and then get this thing passed, because they're just gonna, reach out to each of you directly. The other thing is they're about ready to design their storage lockers, their storage for the kayaks. And we're about ready to go to design ours too. And we're also trying to figure out a fee for ours. Well, if the space changes, we need to know that now before we start coming up with some matrix of our 40% or the racks when we don't really know what it is. So I'd rather have, we have gone back and forth on for many years on this. So we really need direction from council. Council member, well, I'd like to go back to Jeff first and then Council member Eversole.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make, I looked up at the study session date and Mayor's memory was great. It was February 11th when we had that study session that City Council requested the $100,000 amount.
And I would agree, I would imagine that Jeff would agree with me that we need some direction to know where to go.
Yeah, yes, I agree. It's going to help. It's going to make the discussion of awarding a contract a lot easier. Otherwise, we don't know where the funding's coming from.
Right. Councilmember Eversole.
Yeah, let me make sure I'm mute on. I do recall the conversation as well. And I think I had counseled that we should not lower it so much. If my memory serves me correctly, I might be wrong on that, but that seems to stick in my mind. But this feels like a self-inflicted wound that we did to ourselves. And if the council or Gig Harbor Kayak Club has signed this agreement, I think we should put forward to authorize the mayor to do it.
Councilmember Franklin.
Well, I think that, as I said earlier, I think the whole thing is an injustice to the community. So I would like to amend the motion. I would amend the motion to have the Canoe and Kayak Club raise $100,000 and delete, that gives them, and that would entitle them to 5 years. And as part of this motion, allow them a 5-year lease on the property starting July 1st of 2021. June 30th of 2021. That gives them, because really the $100,000, it's not like it's rent credit. I mean, it's not like we're getting anything out of it. Either you can call it rent, which if we just did away with this whole thing, it'd be rent. It's just, otherwise it's just a credit towards what they owe. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. The city's not coming out ahead under either scenario. I mean, we're still putting out the whole $700,000 to build the project, and then we're just getting it back incrementally as a rent credit. So that's my amendment.
Okay, is there a second? Councilmember Himes?
I'll second that.
Okay. Carrie, you looked like you were about ready to push your button.
Well, I was going to recommend that there be a second before Councilmember Franich speak to his motion to amend, but it's been seconded, so we should move on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so to clarify, Councilmember, go ahead, Councilmember Markley.
I was just going to ask if Councilmember French could clarify the amendment just one more time with the.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes. I make the motion to amend the original motion to have the Canoe and Kayak Club raise $100,000 towards construction costs and have the lease term, a 5-year lease with them commencing June 30th of 2021 with no extensions, unless authorized by the council at the expiration of the lease, but not have it in here that they're automatically entitled to it.
Yes, Carrie.
Probably Director Langhelm can speak to this, or I think he already has alluded to this, but I'll just note that this Franich motion to amend is something that the city would be proposing unilaterally. Obviously, we don't have any indication whether or not the Canoe and Kayak team would agree to that. They did sign the second amendment that's in the packet, but we don't know if they would agree to the motion to amend that's now on the table. It's a practical point.
Right.
Well,
But it gives them something to go with. Now, if the $100,000 is already in this, do we just need to amend it for the 5-year?
Yeah.
Because the 100,000 is already in here. So I don't know why we have to amend something that's already in there. Jeff?
Well, I just want to be clear that my question is going to be back to Councilmember Franich, because the current second amendment breaks the $100,000 into 2 separate payments. And so if I'd like to have Councilmember Franich be very clear, is that $100,000 all one-time payment with a specific due date, or is it split as it is outlined in the current draft second amendment?
As outlined on page 3 of 3.
Okay.
So with that, really, in a way, all you're amending is the allowable time. So it may be to keep it simpler. Really, the only difference you're saying is the allowable time of 5-year lease, July 1st, 2021.
Right, which actually is a 7.5-year lease, because their lease started in 2019.
Right, I'm
Is
just
that
trying to,
correct?
yeah, I'm just trying to say we probably don't need to amend things that are already in there.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Okay. So
But
let's,
the reason I mentioned the 100,000 is because that seems to be the sticking point from the second amendment compared to what was in the first amendment language.
right. But again, for clarity, if the only thing that's different is the lease time, could we amend to allow a 5-year lease July 1st, 2021? And that's and then the rest of it is the same as this is.
Right. I mean, I believe that the First Amendment lease read that the lease commenced in 2019, June 30th.
Right, but this is a second amendment, so we're not really
Right.
talking about the first. Okay. Okay, Councilmember Abersol.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of confused on all this. I guess my question is to Councilmember Franich, because I'm reading in this language on page 5 of 5 in section 1 here. The Kayak Club will be entitled to the initial 5-year term and will not have any right to extend this agreement. They may request such an extension from the city, but the city is under no obligation to grant any extension. So doesn't that, in my opinion, I feel that covers what you're talking about? Am I wrong here? This is really kind of getting confused.
I think it's appropriate to look at page 4 of 5 in the packet, and specific. And here, why don't I bring it up on screen? And there's a term in here that or a section. So it's the last section on this page. Are you able to see it on your screen? Mine is,
It's all messed up.
let me stop. I don't know why. It's same thing. Mine is not showing. But it's that last section on that page. Huh.
Yeah, the under section 3.
Right, section 3, and it's not. So if you can just look at section 3, because apparently my screen's not letting me show it.
And Councilmember Abersol,
It says,
I think what you're referring to is if they do not pay the money, then they are not entitled to the extension.
Correct.
In that, on page 3 of 3.
Correct.
Right. So
Yeah.
my amendment is that they're not entitled to it at all, unless the city council 5 years from July of this year chooses to do it. I think that's the fairest thing for the community, because I think there's going to be a heck of a lot more than 30 general public people that are going to want to store their kayaks in that facility over time.
And Councilmember Abersol, did you get enough clarity on what you wanted?
I think Jim answered my question, but I'm still,
Swallowing
this is just
this
blowing
up.
up in my mind. I almost want to table this thing and come back to it. I don't even want to touch it right now. I'm so hesitant.
Right. Councilmember Markley.
Yes, thank you. So I would agree with Councilmember Franich. Could it be just as simple as just changing the language in that section 3 to just say GHC KRT shall donate to the city an amount not less than 100,000, not including any previous payments, and may not extend this lease for 2 additional 5-year terms upon taking out that upon written notice, unless approved by the city council after July, whatever that date was, 2020, whatever that date is, 5 years. Can we just like change that sentence, that section, and just have that be
yes, that's where I would recommend that change be if we were to propose this back to the canoe and kayak race team. But it would, from what I wrote down, it would be allow a 5-year lease, 1 5-year lease starting June 30, 2021, no other extensions unless authorized by the city council. That's what I wrote down.
Yes, that sounds great.
That would handle.
And I believe that intent is clear as it's been verbalized, but there would need to be further revisions on page 5 of 5 in small Roman numerals 1 and 2, because it continues to tie payments to options, even though the city has the right to decline an extension request. I do think that more language changes will be needed to fulfill the intent of Councilmember Franich's motion.
Yeah, I agree, and we could clean that up.
And it is, of course, subject to agreement from the GHCKRT.
Right.
If we cleaned that up tonight and agreed to it, would that be able to be presented to them then as amended? Or do we need to table this and come back and amend that language later?
Well, I think that, and though I would also defer to Ms. Sand, but I think that what we would do is the direction, we wouldn't be having a motion to authorize an amendment. You would just be giving direction to staff to go back to the canoe and kayak race team with that revision to the amendment. That would be what I would think we should be the next step.
Okay.
But I do, if the kayak team reaches out to you and then which they will, and then we do all this and then we come back with that and then you want something else, it's just more, it's a lot of staff going back and forth with all these different options. And that's what we've been doing. So I would hope that whatever you want us to do and direct staff, that we try to stick to it as best as possible. Council, let's see, who hasn't, Councilmember Abersol.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just say that we've already put so much staff time onto this project that another 1,000 hours isn't going to change anything.
Well, we may not get another project done, something already in our CIP. So don't, just so you know. And we are having, Jeff is doing parks right now too. Councilmember Markley.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put more on staff either, and I don't want to delay this any further and keep round robining it. I don't see why we can't come to some kind of a consensus of direction. Just get it back to them real quick and then just approve it at the next. I don't see why this has to be difficult.
I think we could. I think if we spent 5 or 10 minutes, we could probably do the things, if that, and get this cleared, and then be able to have council authorize us to go down that path and get their approval.
I mean, could we just all agree that if we're approached by the kayak team individually after we've already come to consensus here, that we're not going to change our minds again and try and go through this all over again? I mean, it just seems like we could come to an agreement on what we want these terms to be, because we're going to reduce it so much to 100,000. I think it's fine to not have that lease extended unless another council decides to do that later. How hard is it to just put that in here? And then just, that's the direction, change the little bit of wording and then just approve it at the next, if they accept it, then just approve it. Boom.
Right. Let's try.
Yeah, and unless I hear any objections from council, I mean, that's the general direction that I'm hearing, then I'd say that's would be my marching orders.
Let's do it.
I feel like that would be the least amount of staff time taken and the least amount of confusion if we just.
Okay, so how about if we take Jeff, page 1 of 3 of the second amendment. I don't think anything has to be changed on that page. Would you agree?
Well,
and Carrie, I want you to weigh on this as well. Yeah, Councilman Bob Larson.
I think you already started on the process. I just wanted to clarify, because you've got the motion and the amended motion on the table, and you might want to consider, I'm not sure if can be done, backing out of both of those. Then you can continue discussion at a future, perhaps a study session or some other time, unless you wanted to try to take it up tonight, but I don't know if you're gonna be able to accomplish that.
Well, we've had many study sessions and I'd rather not start all over again. I think council would agree. Councilmember Himes.
Yeah, I think we had 3.5 heads bobbing up and down. We were close there. And I think we're at the 100,000 level. We're at 1 5-year term. And then any future extension, essentially, they're allowed to apply for an extension subject to approval of the council. Just change the words just exactly as I said them on page 3, I think it is, of 5. And then clean up anything else that's tied to that. It has to be cleaned up to reflect that.
Right.
And go. I think we're at that point.
This is the city administrator. I'm just trying to determine how you could do that at the same time you've got the motion and the amended motion on the table, and how you go about voting on those.
Well, I think Councilmember Frenich, I believe, could retract his motion.
Yeah,
and offer a new one.
Well, yeah, I can definitely pull back my amendment, and then I guess spent Councilmember Abersol made the original motion, and then I would like to come forward with a I don't know if it's a vote or a show of hands, that we are directing staff to go down a certain path, so everybody's clear what path we're going down moving forward. So, Ms. Sand, is it appropriate for me to withdraw my amendment?
You certainly could. I do think that where we're at right now, it seems that a majority of the council understands the intent of the amendment, And my hope was that we could start at section 3 of the Second Amendment and clarify any of the language regarding the new term. I think we understand the payment is $100,000, and we just need to make sure that with regard to your motion, that the intent is clear that it will be for a single 5-year term, starting, I believe you said July 1st of 2021. So then it would carry forward to 2026. But what I'm not clear on is what is the timing of the payment of the $100,000? Is it still going to be divided into a first installment of 50 and a second installment of 50? But it's not going to, of course, be tied to any additional extensions of time, correct?
That was my intention.
Okay, and that received a second from Councilmember Himes, correct?
Yep. Correct.
So if the council would vote on that, I can work with Jeff Langhelm to revise this Second Amendment consistent with that motion.
Right. Yeah, just a sec.
Councilmember Franich, you mentioned 2 dates. First, you said July 1st, 2021, and then the second time you read it, you said June 30th.
July 1st, because I believe that the original had June 1st going back 5 years from now. So July 1st is fine. That's.
Yes, Josh.
I just want to make sure that council is clear that the motion on the table is to execute the agreement. So if council makes these revisions and the mayor takes them to the Kayak Club and the Kayak Club agrees to them, it would not come back to council for review again.
Right.
Good.
Yes.
We would do what you said, which is pretty straightforward, what Councilmember Franich said. So it's a single 5-year term, July 1st, 2021. The structure of the two $50,000 payments are exactly the same, and it's subject to another council at the end of the 5-year, what they choose to do if they want to extend it.
Right, and also cleaning up the language at the bottom of page 2.
Yes. Okay. There's a motion. There's a second.
It's an amendment.
Yes, it's okay. Yep. There's a motion. There's there's amended motion, and now I need to open up the public comment. So I'm opening up the public comment. Bob, was there any written comments on this?
Actually, I think we've been through this already, Mayor. I think you're on to the other piece. So it's that's okay.
I already do the public comment.
We're at the.
I closed the public comment. I already did it. Sorry, forgot. Okay, I'm going to go down a roll call. All those in favor, say aye. Starting with Councilmember Franich.
Aye.
Councilmember Rodenberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Abersold.
Aye.
Councilmember Wook.
Aye.
Councilmember Markley.
Aye.
Councilmember Himes.
Aye.
And Councilmember Denson left us, and that's on the amended motion. So now we have to vote for the original motion, correct, Carrie?
Yes, that's correct. And to remind the council, as your assistant clerk also reminded you, that is the original motion is to execute.
Okay. The original motion is to execute with the amendments.
Correct, consistent with the amendment.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Okay, motion passes. If there's no objection, can we have a 5-minute recess? Okay. Yes, we are back to our Gig Harbor City Council meeting of May 10th. We're on to new business number 3, which is Murphy Landing's Marina Navigation Channel Dredging Agreement. We'll have a report from our Public Works Director, Jeff Langhelm.
Thank you, Mayor. So the proposed agreement that you have before you tonight is based on our ongoing discussions that we've had with council and staff and the Public Works Committee. This dredging agreement is also described in the 2021 budget, and we discussed it at the first quarter council update for budget objectives last week, 2 weeks ago. The intent of the agreement is to resolve the existing and future responsibility for dredging of the Murphy's Landing Marina due to the sedimentation process that occurs in their yacht basin. The agreement does provide for the city to perform the design and permitting of the future dredging operation. And then it dictates that the Murphy's Landing Marina is obligated to construct and pay for the dredging. And so the marina also agrees in this dredging agreement that this will be the last such dredging activity at that marina that the city will be involved with. No future responsibility for the city in this area. And that's a summary of the agreement. Any questions?
Okay, Councilmember Wook.
Yes, thank you. Jeff, I assume that the Murphy's Landing folks have seen this and have agreed to it.
Yes, I thought the version provided was actually the signed version, so
I didn't see a signature on there, which was why my question.
Oh, okay. Yes, they have. They did a digital signature on this agreement. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Let's see. Okay, we will open it up for public comment. We're opening up public comment. Bob Larson, were there any written public comments on this?
Mayor, we did not receive any written public comments on this item.
Thank you. I will now turn to the people, the panelists of the participants on the call. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this? You will have 3 minutes, and Mr. Wick. Go ahead.
Good evening, council. Can you guys hear me okay, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, they can.
I'm a little troubled by the contract, and I'd like to share with the council why. I've actually walked down and observed Donkey Creek after periods of moderate to heavy rainfall. And I've also walked the Cushman Trail. And of course, I couldn't help but notice the devastation to that watershed. And that was secondary to Gig Harbor's permitting. So from my perspective, granted it's a lay perspective, if the city permits construction or development that results in, issues or concerns that impedes others' businesses' expected practices, such as Murphy's Landing and boat moorage, it seems to me that it would be incumbent upon the city of Gig Harbor to incur all the costs, not just the permitting, the design, but to actually pay the cost to dredge that marina for them. It just seems that it would be reasonable for that expectation. And part of the reason I bring this forward is I'm going to be expecting the city to do the same thing with issues that I anticipate will occur in the future. When property damage is sustained, secondary to permitting actions, I think the city needs to just step forward and do the right thing. So I would ask that the council discuss this and say, well, maybe we probably should pay the costs, all the costs for this. And I can't be the only local resident that has walked down and seen Donkey Creek filled with muck and silt after a heavy rainfall. And it's not a normally occurring event. I looked at the language drafted in the document, and it says it's just normally occurring, and that just doesn't happen normally. If the watershed is intact, the trees are intact, the ground's intact, you don't have, hundreds and hundreds of tons of metric tons of silt spewing into that location and disrupting a marina's business expectancy. So thank you for allowing me to speak, Mayor Kuhn, on this issue, and thank you, council, for considering this comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Rylene Rogers, go ahead. Please state your name and address. I see your hand up.
Oh, I'm mute.
Hi.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, Raylene Rogers, the property manager of Murphy's Landing Marina, 3901 Harborview Drive. So am I ready to talk?
Yes, thank you. I'll start
Okay.
the clock again too. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank Mr. Wick for his comment. We did have $1 million special assessment at Murphy's Landing to help with the Donkey Creek sediment coming in. And this agreement is really not part of that Donkey Creek. It's the outfall pipe that had a breach so the Donkey Creek really is not involved in this transaction, but we did have that $1 million special assessment to put in the berm at Murphy's Landing.
Thank you. I don't want to cut you off. Are you finished?
I'm done. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm done.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment? Okay, I will close the public comment. And any council deliberation, Councilmember Wu.
Yes, I move to approve and authorize the mayor to execute the dredging agreement with Murphy's Landing Marina.
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Okay, motion passes 6-0. On to new business number 4, on-call private development review assistance, professional service contract. Boy, Jeff, you just get all the favorites tonight.
Yeah.
This one's exciting. Yeah, go ahead.
It is. Council, thank you, Mayor. Council, as you know, 2 employees of the city's engineering division have resigned in the past few months. One of the primary tasks for both of those employees, while within the engineering division, was to perform engineering review of private development impacts to the public right-of-way and to assess those impacts and see if they're consistent with the public works standards. We are trying to currently balance staff capacity for the review of private developments. And by doing this, we're trying to meet timelines that are obligated under RCW for land use review. And then we're also trying to maintain a reasonable level of service for development customers. Because some of those RCW timelines are those RCW timelines are established for land use review. However, for engineering review, there are no timelines associated in the state code. So we have levels of service standards that we try to achieve. And so those 2 people that were in the engineering division were key players in helping us achieve both of those 2 tasks. And then what we have before you tonight is a professional services contract from 3J Consulting that would provide us those necessary engineering services to meet both the RCW timeline requirements for review for engineering and also the level of service. It requires an engineering firm to do this work. They have to be a licensed engineer to be qualified and have to know the city processes to do it efficiently and effectively. And so the contract you have before you tonight with 3J Consulting meets those criteria. And so we would have little to no support for training of the consulting firm to bring them on board and perform this review. Now, this work wasn't authorized under the budget for 2021. We weren't anticipating losing staff. So that's why it's here under new business tonight. But we are recommending approval of this professional services contract. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. I don't see any clarifying questions, so we'll open up the public comment. Bob Larson, was there any written comments that were turned in?
Mayor, there were not any written comments on this item tonight.
Thank you. I will open it up for callers that are on their computer or phone. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Wick. Just one moment. Go ahead, Mr. Wick.
Thank you, Mayor Kuhn and ladies and gentlemen of the council. As you know, I sent you all an email earlier this evening and I didn't get any response back. So I wanted this public comment to be part of the record because I am concerned that down the road, I'm going to need to, this could actually impact us. So that's part of the reason I stayed on the phone and listened to your deliberations. So one of the things that Director Langhelm just said, he says that they needed to hire an engineering firm. They have to know the city processes. And that was a concern to me because there is a deep flaw in the city's processes. And I don't think, well, I shouldn't assume this, but there are deep flaws in the city's processes as far as development agreements, engineering, public works standards. I think the drainage deficits on our property and the development that's occurring within the Scansey Avenue drainage, I think validates that statement. So some of the specifics I asked council to give some consideration to this evening before voting to approve this. And I'm repeating what I've already sent via email. I noticed the city only has, well, the first thing is per the contract, there's only a requirement for a 3-year period that these records be preserved. And according per the Public Records Act, that is not, from my understanding, is not acceptable. And also the city only has, they indicated that the absence of 2 city engineers, Mr. Langhelm said that was the basis for this agreement, this contract, but I only noticed 1 city engineer position posted. The other issue is the communication between the city personnel and this engineering firm in Portland is going to be conducted via Bluebeam. And I didn't know what that was. So I never heard of it. So I looked it up and what I noticed right off the bat, it says 180 days after a Bluebeam session expires, the session is deleted permanently. It cannot be recovered at this point. So the concern is, based on the Public Records Act, the city needs to be able to produce all communications with all city employees and all elected officials, upon somebody submitting a request for public records. So I believe this contract as submitted is inconsistent with Washington state law based on the Public Records Act, also known as the PRA. And I also question the appropriateness of retaining an Oregon-based engineering firm, given the contract does identify a requirement, which includes the need for site visits, which means the engineer or engineers would have to travel from Portland up to Gig Harbor and back again, which I estimate about 6-hour plus round trip drive. And that would be, of course, at the taxpayer's expense. I think the city of Gig Harbor's residents would object to that vehemently. Also, the liability insurance requirements. That was a major red flag for me because I know something about this. And $1 million, $2 million, when we're talking about 20, 30, $40 million, $50 million projects, If somebody makes a mistake, or if there's negligence, or if there's an error, and I'm not saying that your contracted company would, but insurance, of course, is always there for the what if, is absolutely, I'll let you guys fill in the words from there. So I would ask that the council give that contract some serious consideration. And at the very minimum, I would ask that there be some deliberation and discussion on these specific topic points, because they will impact us, I'm confident, down the road. And I'm also concerned about the 3-year. The 3 years is kind of.
If you can wrap it up.
Okay, well, I don't want to be disrespectful, Mayor Kuhn, to you and the council, so I'll wrap it up at there. Please deliberate on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the callers that would like to comment? Okay, I will close the public comment. Councilmember Franich.
Thank you. So if you could, Jeff, if you could please speak to the criteria that Bluebeam has for when they delete documents.
I'll let Katrina answer that.
Thank you, Jeff. Councilmember Franich, the city utilizes Bluebeam for all of our planning, building, and engineering review. It's a collaborative, integrative technology by which staff from each division are able to input their review comments on each of the projects. The city Bluebeam software, we do capture every time that we send comments to applicants. We do capture those and put them into our box.com. So we are not housing official city records on Bluebeam's website. We are hosting them on our own servers. And each time we send comments or receive any documents, those are properly stored per the city's records retention schedule.
Very good. Thank you for that. And also I had a question, it is kind of, they are from Beaverton, Oregon. So on the information background, it says this consulting firm is familiar with and well versed in city's codes and permitting processes. What I've never heard of this particular company before. What can you tell me of a few instances where the city has worked with them?
Yes, specifically their primary engineer who's going to be doing this work for us is Josh Gilchrist, who used to be an employee of the city. He lives at his same residence here in the area, and he will not be having to travel from Oregon to Gig Harbor. He'll be still having to travel from his place he was living when he was working for the city of Gig Harbor, because he's doing it working remotely for 3J Consulting.
And is he a senior project manager? Is he a civil engineer 1, or is he an administration product specialist?
I'd have to look at I'd have to look directly at that contract. I call them to see what he is. I don't recall what his title is there.
Well, we have the bulk of the hours under the administration project specialist.
Okay, I could get back with you on that one. I don't recall what his title is at 3J Consulting.
But well, thank you for clarifying that. So you do believe that we're in good hands with this company, given the history of this ex-employee has?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Very
he's well versed in our standards. He has the engineering degree and the licensure required to work independently, and he knows our public works standards, and he knows our city private development process.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, Community Development Director Katrina.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, to support what Director Langholm has said about Josh Gilchrist and his services, the staff in engineering as well as planning and building divisions worked very well with Mr. Gilchrist during his tenure. He knows the standards both for public works engineering as well as land use regulations. I wholeheartedly support this contract going forward. Without having Josh Gilchrist here, I think this is the second best thing. An added benefit to this is some continuity when the public works positions are filled. We would be able to have Josh Gilchrist step in and in some form of training assistance for the new employees. So I wholeheartedly support this and hope that you will as well.
Councilmember Himes.
I'm ready to move on.
Okay, so there's a recommendation on page 2 of 12.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Move to approve. And authorize the mayor to execute a professional services contract with 3J Consulting. And the rest is the exact words that are on page 1 of 12 under the proposed council action.
Well, I think we need to read it in its entirety.
Okay. Approve and authorize the mayor to execute a professional services contract with 3J Consulting Incorporated for on-call private development review assistance to support Public Works Engineering Division private development review processes in an amount not to exceed $60,060.
Second.
There's a second. Yes, Public Works Director Jeff Langhelm.
I just was looking at the contract amounts and the exhibit to the contract. I just want to clarify for Councilmember Franich. In Exhibit B, under Civil Engineer 1, it has the initials JKG. That's Josh Gilchrist. The total amount of hours is 430 hours for this work. Estimated.
Thanks, Jeff, for that clarity. Okay, with that, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained, motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thanks. New business, item 5, Sports Complex Lease Agreement, YMCA. Report by City Administrator Bob Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council and the public, the proposed council action for tonight is to authorize the mayor to sign a lease agreement with the YMCA of Pierce and Kitsap counties in a form substantially similar to the lease that's attached to the agenda bill. A little bit more background. Obviously, council's been briefed, I believe, extensively on this particular matter. We've been working with the YMCA of Pierce and Kitsap counties. We being primarily, obviously, a lot of credit goes to the council for the briefings. It's been Mayor Kuhn and Public Works Director Langhelm and myself, as well as our city attorney, Daniel Kenny, along with obviously the YMCA's representatives. But we are at I believe, the point in our journey where we can recommend a lease agreement to the council for approval. And we've gotten assurances from the YMCA that they are prepared to sign the document as well once the council takes formal action, if they do in fact approve it and authorize the mayor to sign the lease agreement. There's a lot of information obviously in that lease agreement. We went over last Thursday again, but some of the highlights obviously for the members of the public, we'll be leasing city property to the YMCA to create a sports complex. And it's described as phase 1A, phase 1B being the city's portion on the south side of this particular area. It consists of 2 synthetic turf fields, play fields, approximately the size of soccer fields, 360 feet by 210 feet each. We'll have field lighting, fencing around the turf play field, a restroom facility, concession stand, 100 parking lots to accommodate that, and various other amenities. The YMCA is committed to funding the entire phase 1 improvements. The city will be providing the YMCA with a $350,000 youth activity, I don't remember the name, the acronym, youth, Jeff Langhelm, please help me with that one.
Athletic field.
Thank you. A grant from the state of Washington for the project. I apologize for that. The improvements will be owned by the YMCA. We'll own the underlying land. Construction of the improvements would be under the lease terms would be completed by December 31, 2024, or such other date for completion is set forth by that grant agreement that I just mentioned, the YAF grant, as may be amended. In exchange for the lease, the YMCA agrees to build the improvements, as I said earlier, and provide public access and use of those fields. The YMCA must provide community use and benefit as consideration for the lease. And we still have to go through a management agreement for that particular issue. Which and some of the highlights are that they'd have to provide for affordable rental fees and program rates as further described in the lease. They'd have to provide financial assistance, those residents and households meeting the United States Department of Health and Human Services poverty guidelines to participate in the YMCA programs and activities, provide designated times and hours for free public use of the improvements. And then work in collaboration with the city and other community agencies to host free public or special events on the improvements, as well as clean and maintain the parking lot, the restroom, concession facilities, and internal and perimeter landscaping. The initial term for the lease would be 35 years, and it also has the provisions for 3 renewal periods of 20 years each following the initial term. If the lease is terminated, the YMCA has the option to purchase the leased property from the city at fair market value. And the lease again describes the process to come to the fair market value. The option to purchase is not available at the conclusion of the final renewal period. And then if the cities cannot agree upon the price for the YMCA's purchase of the premises and the YMCA chooses to not purchase the premises, the city would then be required to purchase the Phase 1A improvements at fair market value. And there's a method in the lease agreement to determine that fair market value if it comes to that. And then the lease also outlines the scope and process for the Phase 1 improvements as well. This includes an application deadline of June 30, 2023 for the YMCA to submit necessary permits for the Phase 1A improvements to the city. If those permits are not submitted by that date, then either party, the city or the YMCA, may terminate this agreement with no penalty. Also included is a listing of the city's contributions to the Phase 1A improvements, which range from sewer line installation to construction of the restroom and concession stand. And by approving this lease, the city would be committing to those contributions. I just wanted to mention that the restroom and concession stand, the city constructs those, but the YMCA would reimburse us for those costs. That provides for us to, if we wanted to proceed with the Phase 1B improvements prior to the Phase 1A improvements, we would have a permanent restroom facility available for folks that wanted to use our park. I believe that takes care of most things here. The fiscal considerations I said earlier are, would allude to it. They're going to pay a lease payment of $1 a month for the duration of the lease agreement. And then the city is committing to both the completion of the city contributions to Phase 1A as well as the completion of its own project Phase 1B within certain timelines. Again, the recommended motion from staff is to authorize the mayor to sign a lease agreement with the YMCA of Pierce and Kitsap counties in a form substantially similar to the lease that's attached to your agenda bill. That concludes my report, Mayor.
Thank you. As Bob Larson said, we all got to ask questions Thursday extensively to Daniel. Councilmember Himes.
Yeah, I had a question on the proposed council action. You talk about in a form substantially similar to the lease attached. If we're in agreement and the Y is in agreement, why don't we just say for the lease attached and end the discussion? This sounds like legalese to me.
It perhaps is, Mayor, Kuhn, and council members. This was just in case, because this document was prepared and provided to council last Tuesday, that there might have been some minor typographical errors or some other issues that we needed to clean up. It may be like housekeeping issues. They were not substantive in any way, shape, or form, and that's why we had to put the.
I'm strongly in favor of tying us all to the mast, and we go with this baby. Period. I can really believe in it. Go.
I can attest that this is, in fact, I believe the replica of the exact agreement. There were just a couple of minor issues that were taken care of on the exhibits themselves. We just had a few things that were in too much detail. Frankly, we had too much detail in the exhibits. We just had to clean that up, and we've done that, and it's ready to go. The YMCA has the document in hand. We obviously have the document in hand, but if the mayor is authorized to sign this tonight, we'll have the original that we'll prepare, and then we'll forward those to the YMCA for signatures. I believe middle of this week.
So is what we saw last Thursday, are there a little few things changed since then?
My understanding, Mayor, this is Administrator Larson, that no, there were not any changes made. We made those corrections to those exhibits because we had too much detail in I think Exhibit A on one of them. We just needed to pull those out. That's all it was.
Okay, then could we just get rid of that word? Authorize the mayor to sign the lease agreement with YMCA.
From suggesting that or recommending that, because again, we've got the document that we produced and gave to council last Tuesday, which again has that has those minor changes that we made to the document. It'll be okay if you just trust us. We've got the right document.
Okay, Councilmember Franich.
Yeah, I share Councilmember Himes. I don't like the word substantially. Can you just, if we just put in any Scribner's errors to be possibly fixed, but in a form substantially similar, that's some pretty vague language that scares me, because you're asking us to approve it.
So Carrie, what's the best we could do to make it give a little more reassurance to council?
So Mayor, council members, the substantially similar is intended to basically reserve the right, as City Administrator Larson said, to make any minor Scrivener error type corrections. They are not supposed to be substantive changes, but just any minor corrections that may be needed, for example, in the numbering of or the lettering of the paragraphs, things like that. It is meant to allow changes that are very minor. That said, if the council's not comfortable with that, it could instead be, the motion could be changed to instead authorize the mayor to sign a lease agreement with the YMCA of Pierce and Kitsap counties in the form of the lease attached, and just take out substantially similar. It's up to the council, but again, the intent is, as Administrator Larson said, to only allow for minor typographical and Scrivener error corrections, and that's all.
Could we just say, I mean, I want to allow him to be able to change those. So minor typographical errors.
I think the proper term is Scrivener errors.
Certainly, that could be rephrased to only refer to Scrivener's errors as being corrected.
You want to do it, Bob?
Do we have to do an amendment to that, or can we just acknowledge that we're changing that word?
Yeah, Mayor, this is just a recommended motion that I recited. So you could, council member, whoever makes the motion, if there's going to be a motion made, they can just use it as referred to by Attorney Carrie Sand. That would work as well.
Right. The maker of the motion can simply rephrase.
Okay. Councilmember Franich.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign a lease agreement with the YMCA of Pierce County well, I'm gonna have to change this around. Authorize the mayor to sign the proposed lease agreement with the YMCA as presented, with any minor Scrivener errors fixed.
Point of order, I don't think we've had public comment.
Oh. You're right.
Point well taken. Okay, so we'll come right back to that. But we were working on clarifying any other clerical comments. Okay, we will open it up to the public comment. Bob, have there been any written comments?
Mayor, there were not any written comments in this item tonight.
Okay. Callers, if I'm opening up for public comment of any of the callers. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Wick.
Good evening again, Mayor Kuhn, members of the council. You know, I'm going back to a statement that Mr. Franich said. He said, vague, this is a quote, vague language, you're asking us and to approve it. And I'm going back to a little, I'm a little bit troubled by that Councilman Franich is raising a concern about vague language when the city council approved final plat for the courtyards at Scansy Park without even accepting public comment after inviting it. And he was one of the guys, I think it was a unanimous vote. You all went back and said, yay, or whatever it was, after you made me sit there for 3 hours. And I even verified with your associate city clerk that I signed in on the appropriate document to provide public comment. And you made me sit there for almost 3 hours. You humiliated me, you embarrassed me, and you showed utter disrespect. And so when I hear Councilman Franich, expressing a reservation, again, I'm quoting him, vague language, you're asking us to approve it. Wow. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone, any other callers? Okay, I will close the public comment and I will go back to Councilmember Franich.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign the lease agreement with the YMCA of Pierce County as presented with Scribner errors fixed.
Second.
There's a second. Any Councilmember Wook?
Yes, I'd just like to say hooray, because it looks like we're actually moving forward on this, and I know how important this is to our community. So hooray! And I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
And I will say hooray too. I've worked for 3.5 years on this, from a year of a MOU to 2 years, 2.5 years of a lease agreement. I would never have known in my dreams that it would take 3.5 years. So, but we did have COVID, and I would never have known about that either.
Let us
So
vote, we'll be done.
there's a lot of new things. Councilmember Markley.
Yes, I echo all the yays and cheers for this going forward. Just something minor in the motion. It's YMCA of Pierce and Kitsap counties. I don't know if that has to be accurately stated to add Kitsap in there, but just thought I'd bring it up just in case.
Got it. Thank you. Councilmember Hyams.
Well, I will wait for the vote, but I want to thank Carrie Sand on her first meeting here, managed to get this thing through fairly clean. And you'll have to relay that to your associate, but thank you.
Hey, timing is everything.
Yeah, do tell Daniel tonight. Go ahead. Great. Okay, with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yay, motion passes 6-0. That's great. Congratulations, everyone. So, good. Okay, we have council reports and council comments. We have a planning building committee, Councilmember Hyams.
Yes, Planning Building Committee met. We focused almost the entire meeting on growth targets for Vision 2050. And we are very active on that still, and will be for probably the next couple of months. But I think we're fully understanding the basis for the growth targets right now, and hopefully can present something in the not too distant future as our proposal on what the magic number will be. So stay tuned.
Great, thank you. And we have Public Parks Commission, Councilmember Eversole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Parks Commission met on May 5th, 2021. They approved the minutes. In old business, we did an inventory, I should say they did an inventory of the parks facilities where they rated the parks. They felt that they were overall, the parks were clean, working, and in good shape. They checked things like bathrooms, the playgrounds, the trails, and the sidewalks, and a couple more things. I didn't have space to write those down, but they had a pretty good general feeling about the cleanliness and appropriateness of our parks. They also talked about creating an adopt a park program. They feel that 70% of our parks would fit within this program context, and they are planning to bring a resolution to council. So I'm just bringing that to your awareness. And they also talked about the Ancich home powered boat storage. We discussed rental terms, rents, and rental types of boats or canoes or paddle boards that would be allowed to be utilize that space. In the new business, we had the election of officers. Ben Coronado was reelected to the chair position, and Mary Barber may have been reelected to vice chair, or this may be her first time, I can't remember, but she is the vice chair. And then we took some comments from the group. One of the members said that they were in Grandview Forest and they saw potential homeless groups that were camping there. They wanted that to be brought to our attention. Also at Crescent Creek Lower Field, they said that there might be some inappropriate businesses practices going on with people teaching classes like yoga or dog training. They want to make sure that if those people are doing those things, that they have a special use permit or special event permit to be doing that. And they don't want private commercial use in public parks. And then we took public comment from a young man. His name is Edward Peterson. He is in the Boy Scout Troops 2217, and he is going for his Eagle project. He wants to get some service member flags at Veteran Memorial Park established, and we kind of counseled him on what kind of timeline he should expect for that project, and to who they can speak with within the city to discuss that project. So that concludes my Park Commission meeting notes, and thank you again for the opportunity for that.
Thank you. I would like to save a little bit of time. We had 3 council members today that joined us for some interviews, and I'd like to ask Council Member Franich, Rodenberg, and Markley if you could do Wednesday at 1:30 and at 2:30 for some Zoom meetings for an hour each. This is just to save a little time. It's to give you more notice too. So it would be this Wednesday, the 12th at 1:30 and at 2:30 for interviews with interim city administrators.
I can do that.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Franich, can you do that?
Yes.
Councilmember Markley?
Looks to be yes.
Thank you. So Molly, go ahead and set that up. We have 7 council members, so we'll figure out Denson a short period of time for her to at least meet those people as well in a Zoom.
Mayor?
Yes.
Did that happen in person today? Are they going to be in person or?
No, it was by Zoom.
So Wednesday would be?
We're going to treat them all the same. Wednesday would be Zoom as well.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. And go ahead and thank you. Thank you for that. So Molly, will you send them a Zoom? And then, Councilmember Robertson.
Yeah, just a question. I assume that they'll be the same candidates.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I'm trying to give every council member a chance to meet these candidates. And then if you have questions, it is ultimately my decision, but I want support of council. So if you have questions, if you have comments on the people that are being interviewed, by all means, please reach out to me. And there may be others to come too. But again, I'm starting ahead. I have some other things I have to take care of too. So it doesn't mean we're making a decision at all right away. It just is working with our time as it's allowed. So yes, go ahead, Councilmember Albersold.
Yeah, I would just say, Mayor, it's a tough call. I think both interviewees were good potential candidates. Of course, some of our council members have had an opportunity to work with one of them, but I thought both of them presented good interviews, and it's going to be a tough choice. I'd like to hire them both.
Thank you. I don't know what their personal commitment is to different organizations, or if they're trying other cities too. So if all council can keep this confidential, I would appreciate it, because we don't necessarily know what they're telling other people. They're probably not. And so we don't, with family and other types of businesses that they may be seeking, let's just keep it confidential for now. Thank you. Okay. Any other council comments or reports? Okay, we have announcements of other meetings. Public Works Committee is Tuesday, May 11th at 3 p.m. And we have the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee of Monday, May 24th at 4 p.m. And I do think, is this time that we get 3 weeks between council meetings? I think, no.
It'll be between the May 24th and the June.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I was already on May 24th. Okay, not there yet. Sorry. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned. Carrie, it's been a pleasure too. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, council.
My pleasure.